How's it going, everyone? Ish with HYTE here, and today we're going to guide you through the installation, setup, and customization of both the firmware and software of your brand new THICC Q80 Trio. Let's get right into it, shall we? The first thing you're going to want to do is open up your favorite internet browser and navigate to hyte.com/Nexus. This is going to take you to our Nexus landing page, where you will then click on the Download Nexus button. Might take a couple seconds to initialize based off your internet speed, and the download might take anywhere from a few seconds to a few minutes depending on how fast it is. Let's wait for the download to finish before we continue to the next step. Once it's finished downloading, let's open up our File Explorer, navigate to the executable, and we're going to go ahead and double click on it to begin the installation process. It should prompt you for a user account control menu. It's going to ask if you want to allow HYTE Nexus to make changes to this device. We're going to go ahead and click yes. This is now going to open the installer. You're free to close out your File Explorer and your internet browser from here on forward. First, it's going to ask you to agree to the end user license agreement. Then it's going to ask you if you want to install for all user accounts on this device, or if you want to install it just on the currently logged in user, which is your current account. By default, it's set to just the current user. Go and click next. Next, it's going to ask you to choose an install location. Now, this is in case you have a separate drive that you wish to install Nexus to rather than your primary operating system drive. By default, it's going to be based directly on your operating system and under your app data folder. We're going to leave it at the default location and click install. Could take a few seconds to a few minutes depending on your system hardware, but once it's finished, it's going to ask if you want to run HYTE Nexus as you finish the installer. We're going to leave that checked and go and click finish. Next, it's going to ask one more time through user account control if you want to allow this app to make changes to your device. We're going to go and click on yes. You should now see Nexus loading up onto your home screen. A little pop-up in the bottom right-hand corner is going to start scanning for open RGB compatible devices. You are free to ignore that for now. The first thing you want to do is pick whether you want to log into an existing HYTE account, register for a new HYTE account, or simply continue as a guest. For the purposes of this tutorial, we're simply going to continue as guest. Then it's going to ask you to pick your performance tuning for the Nexus software. By default, we've optimized for a healthy balance between efficiency and quality, but based off of your hardware, you can choose to lean it more towards quality or towards efficiency. And this is all three for the widget data polling rate. So this is how frequently Nexus will check your devices for new data and information. Your RGB output resolution, the sampling of RGB that is done based off your current monitor resolution to your devices, and then the RGB streaming frame rate, which is essentially the FPS for your RGB. We're just going to simply click on next and continue to the video wallpapers. These are great fun, but they can affect your computer's performance in some cases. So we have a handy toggle here that allows you to enable and disable it right from the get-go. We're going to leave it enabled by default. Click finish, and now we're going to be taken to the home screen of our Nexus software. From here, the first thing you're going to want to do is go to the Faces widget, click on the drop-down and select the HYTE THICC Q80. And then depending on how quick your system is or how fast your internet connection is, Nexus would have already downloaded and installed the necessary modules and files to both of your computers and the Q80 to make sure they can establish a handshake and connect with one another with all the latest features. If you see that screen, no worries. All Nexus will be doing is downloading and installing the latest packages to make sure you can use your Q80 and that your Q80 is updated and ready for use. From here, the first thing we want to do is then navigate to the settings menu down to the bottom left. And then up here in the firmware version section, if you just received a brand new Q80, chances are it's still on the factory firmware version. And we have a brand new version, which adds a lot of stability fixes, brand new features, and performance enhancements that we want you to enjoy. So in the off chance you're on a version older than 1.0.5.1, there will be a big update button to the right of the firmware version. Go in and click on that to initiate the firmware update. This process will take a few minutes, and there's no loading bar or anything like that that's currently shown. We will be adding that in a future update to improve the user experience and usability of Nexus. But in the meantime, just sit back, relax, and let Nexus do its thing and update your Q80 firmware. You'll know it's successful when you see the THICC Q80 flash the boot animation and start afresh from the beginning. This will indicate that the new firmware version has been loaded on and successfully booted. Just give it a few more minutes, and then Nexus will automatically restart itself to make sure everything is up to date and ready for use. Once it's done updating, we can then go back to the home screen, and we can begin customizing our THICC Q80. In terms of customization, the first thing we'll jump into is the cooling widget, because at the end of the day, the THICC Q80 Trio is first and foremost a CPU liquid cooler. So let's make sure your CPU is running as cool as it can, with the tuned fans and pumps running as quietly and as efficiently as you desire. When you first click on the cooling widget, you'll be met with our universal fan control calibration. Nexus now has the ability to detect third-party fans through PWM headers on your motherboard, and this will allow you to synchronize all the cooling across your entire system directly from Nexus. If you'd like to do this, we can click on the Calibrate button. If you wish to pass, you can click on the Later button. For the tutorial purposes here, let's go ahead and click on Calibrate. Right away, Nexus will then start detecting every single fan port on your system and any GPU fans and controllers that are detected. One by one, it'll ramp it to 100%, down to the minimum percentage, and then once it detects what can actually be controlled, those will be highlighted in blue with check marks, whereas everything else that doesn't have anything connected to it will fade to gray with an X in the top right corner. Then we're going to go ahead and click on Continue, and if at any point you add more fans to your system and you want to recalibrate again, there is a recalibration process, so Nexus will relearn what the fans are, where they're connected, what their minimum and maximum control range is. Clicking Continue, we are now met with the cooling widget, and you can see we've split this into three parts. We have the inputs on the left, curves in the middle, and outputs on the right. What does this mean? Well, inputs are from every component and sensor that is available to be read by Nexus will show up as a potential beginning point of saying, okay, let's monitor this particular statistic or sensor as our starting point, and whatever value is being put out, that's going to be what the curve responds to in the curve section. So let's say we want to base it off of our CPU temperature, which makes a lot of sense because, well, at the end of the day, it's a CPU cooler, right? So we'll feed the CPU temperature into one of the curves we have preset. Let's say balanced. And then balanced is then going to have a preset graph with a response time of 2 seconds. I'll explain more what that is in just a second. And then the output is then sent to the THICC Q80. We already have a line going from there, so let's expand the THICC Q80 and see what balanced is actually controlling. Well, as you can see, balanced is currently controlling the THICC FP12 fans that are daisy-chained via Nexus Link throughout the case, as well as the THICC FP12 Trio that comes pre-installed on the radiator. In terms of the actual pumps, the dual harmonic pumps 1 and 2 inside of the THICC Q80 Trio, those are running at 2000 RPM right now, being controlled by the performance curve. So let's feed our core temperature into the performance curve as well. And now, what essentially Nexus is doing is, it's monitoring your CPU temperature, saying, okay, we'll feed this temperature into the balance curve and the performance curve, and then based off of how hot that is on this curve, we're going to ramp the fans and the pumps as they're mapped out to their outputs from these curves to the speeds that reflect the graph. So our fans are responding to the balance curve, which is taking the CPU temperature as the input, and our pumps are responding to the performance curve, which is taking the, again, CPU temperature as the input. So as you can see, there's a natural flow of pick a sensor, pick a graph, then pick what that controls in terms of your fans and pumps. Now, if you want to customize your own, you could create your own graph. Start off with a preset from silent, balanced, or performance. You could create your own flat curve, which is in other words to say a static RPM percentage. And then you also have the option to create a linear curve, where you define the minimum and maximum, and it'll automatically scale that out across the entire start to finish. In terms of customization of the graphs, you can click in and it'll bring in this menu. Here you have the ability to click and drag on any point inside of this curve, adjust it as you wish, move it around, the minimum, maximum, totally up to you. And then you also have this response time section. This is a crucial element when it comes to customizing your acoustic experience with the THICC Q80 Trio. So Ish, what is response time? Response time is the number of seconds Nexus waits to validate that the temperature has risen and is continuing to stay at that point or continue climbing before it ramps your fans up. This is to prevent those bursty workloads that quickly heat up and cool down your CPU from causing your system to ramp up and down all the time. We've all been there with other coolers, and it's very annoying. We engineer things a little bit more superior around here, so we made sure this is part of the customization experience. So if you want to say, let's say, wait 5 seconds, so Nexus can say, okay, here's the brand new temperature. I'll wait 5 seconds before reading again. Oh, 5 seconds later, the temperature has dropped. Cool, I'm not gonna raise the fan speeds and annoy my user. Wait, the temperature is still high and it's even higher now? Okay, some longer, more sustained workload is being applied. Let me kick the fans up a notch to make sure things are cool and performant. And so that's essentially what Nexus allows you to do. All powered through the cooling widget. And remember, because we did the fan calibration earlier, all of your additional fan ports and GPU fans will show up in the output section as well, and those can also be controlled by any graph or sensor you want within Nexus. Now, before we go any further in terms of customization, let me show you what hardware and firmware control options we have for the THICC Q80 Trio. So in case you don't want to run Nexus or you are running it standalone, it has the ability to control all the fans inside your system as well as the LCD by itself. Yes, this thing has 2 processors inside, 2 gigabytes of RAM, and 32 gigs of onboard storage, so it can control its entire ecosystem by itself. So click on the settings menu. We're going to go into devices, and here you're going to look for the HYTE THICC Q80. We're going to click on the cogwheel next to it, and this will bring us to the actual device settings. We were here earlier to check the firmware version, but in addition to that, we have hardware mode settings. So here, you can upload GIFs, images, videos, and any other media type and save it directly to the onboard storage. So if Nexus isn't running, this is what will be displayed on your THICC Q80 LCD. You also have the ability to change the interval. So let's say you have multiple things you want to cycle through and save on the device. You could cycle through all of them all the way from 2 seconds all the way to once per day. And then if you want to overlay any text, you also have the ability to do that through this menu here. If you want to see what your THICC Q80 Trio is going to look and perform like in firmware mode, you can click on Enable Preview, and this will switch it temporarily off from Nexus Control. That way you can see all the customization you've just gone through. In terms of display settings, we have brightness control, so a slider from 0% to 100%. And then we also have a toggle, which allows the THICC Q80 LCD to turn off when your PC does. We'll toggle this on. And then we have 2 quick buttons that allow you to reboot the display and begin a factory reset in case you need to do some quick troubleshooting. On the second menu, we have the curve control. And here we have 4 different types of control modes. We have software mode, which is the default, which means when Nexus is running, Nexus is going to take over the pumps and the fan speeds of your THICC Q80 Trio. But for your convenience, we've built in 3 hardware modes. Let me quickly explain them. There's mix mode, there's firmware control, and there's motherboard control. First, mix mode is going to set the pump speeds via a firmware curve and then listen to your fan speeds and adjust them based off of your motherboard BIOS settings. Firmware control will set both the pump speeds and the fan speeds directly from the firmware curve. And then lastly, motherboard control is going to set the pump and fans to scale and respond according to the settings from your motherboard BIOS. Then at the bottom, we have a toggle for what we call turbo mode. By default, every THICC Q80 Trio ships with this disabled out of the box. Let me explain why. The fans on the THICC Q80 can go all the way up to 3000 RPM, and the pumps can go all the way up to 4750 RPM. Now, with that maximum performance also comes a significant increase in noise. And for those who want the maximum out of their THICC Q80, we have this. You can enable it, and it will unlock that full range of speed for maximum performance. But for everybody who wants this nice balance between performance and acoustics, we've disabled turbo mode out of the box, which means your fans will be limited to 2,000 RPM and your pumps will be limited to 3,000 RPM, which means you're still getting excellent performance, but without the excess noise that comes with getting and redlining it to the max. So if you want to unlock full performance, go and enable turbo mode, and that will allow you to customize your curves all the way up to 100%. Now, in terms of firmware control and customization, let's switch into firmware control mode. And then on the right side, this is your firmware curve. Keep in mind that the x-axis, which is the bottom that goes horizontal, is your liquid temperature, and your y-axis that goes vertical is your percentage speed. The yellow curve represents the pre-installed THICC FP12 Trio fans, and then the blue curve represents the dual harmonic pumps inside of the THICC Q80 Trio. You can adjust this. This is a 5-point curve that you can adjust at any point and drag anywhere from 0 degrees Celsius liquid temperature all the way up to 50 degrees Celsius. You could customize it both for the pumps and for the fans. And then you could also save this directly to the cooler. So don't forget to do that part. Click the save button, and then it's going to write this firmware curve directly to the THICC Q80 Trio. So at any point, if it's not running through Nexus, if it's not running through your motherboard, this is the curve the Q80 will default to running for your fans and pumps. And if you set it to firmware control, this is the only way it'll listen to any type of input for the fans and your pumps. So if you want a consistent experience across the board, this is going to be the best option to use. If you want a more dynamic and fluid experience, we definitely recommend you leave it in Nexus control. That way you can take advantage of all those sensors that Nexus can tap into for that amazing experience that dynamically responds to your loads in real time. Lastly, we have this animation section, which will allow you to select from a preset RGB effect. So you can do breathing, you can cycle through a color, you can do a rainbow, and you could do a rainbow gradient. And all of this is going to be the default RGB playback behind the LCD on your Q80 every time that Nexus is not running. So you're basically setting the firmware lighting for your Q80 through this tab. That's all in terms of cooling customization and firmware customization. Next up, we're going to take a look at the LCD customization. So to begin customizing the LCD on your Q80, we're going to click into the Faces widget. From here, we're going to click on the drop-down in the top right corner, select the HYTE THICC Q80, and here you'll be met with a few options for customizing your LCD foreground, background, as well as the lighting that's synchronized with it. In the Faces section, we have 5 options for you here. First is clock, and we have 3 different designs you can choose from. We have a digital clock, an analog, and a gradient. Next, we have the performance face, and this will allow you to select any sensor that Nexus can read from your system and display it on the Q80 LCD. We have a few different designs ranging from a single sensor, a multi-stat sensor, which allows you to show up to 3 sensors simultaneously, and then we have live system graphing. And this has a toggle in the top left corner. You can pick and show a single graph, which shows the graph, the live readout of the value, the minimum, the maximum, and the average. And then we also have a multi-mode, where you can show 3 graphs simultaneously. You'll lose the additional details, such as the min, max, and average, but you'll be able to see 3 graphs in real time, all mapped out to different sensors that you can pick. To customize a sensor, up in the top center, click on Sensor 1, and then at the left side, you can select which component the sensor is being pulled from. For example, let's go to GPU real quick. At the bottom, you can notice it changed now to the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4090. Here, you can select which sensor. Let's do temperature for the GPU core. And then you also select a graph time frame. What this means is the line on the graph is going to represent this amount of time. So every X minutes is when the data will get replaced with the next minute of data. And this is ranging all the way from 1 minute on the line to 5 minutes that you can see in real time. To select the second sensor, go up top, click on the second sensor, pick a different component, a different sensor, sensor 3, different component, different sensor, different time frame, all of it easily adjustable directly through the Faces widget. And then you also have options to select and show the hardware name or the sensor name and hide those as well for each sensor. Next, we have the weather face. This allows you to see the weather for any location of your choosing. Here, let's, for example, take Los Angeles. Give it a second. It's going to pull through our weather API and select the weather. You can select which units to display from Fahrenheit and Celsius. You can show the actual current conditions in the background, toggle that on and off. You can show the date and time up at the top of the screen, toggling that on and off. And then you could also show the actual location at the bottom of the screen, also toggleable through this menu here. Next up, we have the screen time face, and this will essentially pick up the current active application in the foreground and tally up how long it has been running since the last time your system booted up. From the moment Nexus boots up, it'll keep track of which programs have been running for how long, and the screen time widget will then reflect those times as you go through your different applications and update your Q80 LCD with the exact time. Lastly, we have the media face. This will synchronize to anything that's playing on your system, either through a browser or local player or Spotify, which is a fan favorite. You can choose from two different designs here, where it's going to show you the album art in the middle and then the track and the artist details down below, or a blank background that can adapt to a few other options we'll show you in just a bit, with the track and the artist, again, at the bottom of the screen. Down here to the bottom left, we have a toggle for playlist mode. So let's say you want your Q80 to automatically cycle through all of the active faces you have. Well, with this drop down here, you can set that time interval. You can rotate it out every 2 seconds or cycle through once per day. And there's a full range of options in between. The next tab is going to be our wallpaper section. And here you can customize the backgrounds behind your faces on the Q80 LCD. We have a handful of presets that are baked into Nexus that you can choose from. And then we also have the ability to upload your own. GIFs, images, videos, any type of media format you have, chances are we support it. So go ahead and upload. And if it's too big for the screen, we have a built-in cropper utility that'll scale it and size it to fit perfectly on your Q80 LCD. As you keep adding your own media, you can also do a playlist mode for those. So anything you upload can cycle through, again, with the same time interval settings, ranging all the way from 2 seconds up until once per day. And then for static images, we also have the option to do a kaleidoscope mode. And what this will do is it'll take the image, angle it, rotate it, zoom out, and then create a kaleidoscope effect that either goes in towards the center of the screen or comes out from the middle of the screen, with a slider that lets you adjust the speed from 0 to 100%. At the very bottom of the wallpaper settings, you will be able to choose your primary, secondary, and accent colors for all of the text and UI elements that are on the display. And here you have a full RGB range customization, along with hex codes that you can input into this text box right here to change the color immediately. And then at the very bottom, we have two sliders. The first is for foreground opacity. So any UI elements that are overlaid on top of the background is what this will adjust from 0 to 100%. And then we also have the foreground overlay opacity. So anything that's overlaid on top of the foreground will also be adjustable from 0 to 100%. Under the lighting section, Nexus by default does not enable a lighting preset, but once you do choose a preset, we have the ability to add custom elements that are displayed in the background, synchronized to the colors from your lighting widget. And for these, we have a fish, a vortex, some holes, a swirl, and bubbles that can be overlaid onto the background. And these will, again, be synced to the colors of your RGB throughout your system. Under the Media tab, this is what's going to control the background for the media face. So remember when we picked the blank background with just the track name and the artist's name at the very bottom of the screen? Here, you can choose from 3 different background options for that. The first is media colors. And so what this will do is it'll take the album art, it'll figure out intelligently by itself which colors are inside of that album art and then play back different colors behind the screen in that matched album art. In the middle, we have living media. This is a favorite amongst the HYTE crew here. This will actually play real time any Canvas videos that Spotify integrates, for example, and play those back live on your LCD, along with the track information and artist information. This provides for the most dynamic and fun experience when listening to music on your system featuring the THICC Q80. And then third, we also have a kaleidoscope mode. So again, kind of like how we had with the backgrounds, if there's an image, there'll be a kaleidoscope effect where it zooms in towards the center of the screen, along with a slider where you can adjust the speed from 0 to 100%. Now, for all these faces, and you have lots of applications installed in your system, let's say you want to map a certain application to a certain face. Well, we can do that through autofocus. Autofocus toggle is disabled by default, but once you enable it, you'll be able to select any application that Nexus is able to detect that's installed on your system and map it to any particular face that you have customized on your LCD. This means whenever Nexus detects that the foreground application has changed to something matching a different face, it'll automatically switch what your LCD is showing to be on that face. For example, let's say you're just working through, you're in Excel or Word and Office or Teams, and you just want to know what time it is to keep track of your next meeting. You can have the clock face up. Then, let's say you switch into gaming mode and you're playing some video games, you can switch to the performance face and show 3 different statistics in real time, live system stat graphs, and see what your temperatures and your FPS is looking like. And then maybe you're listening to music, you're just relaxing, it can automatically switch to the music face, the media face, when you're listening to Spotify, so you can enjoy that dynamic content directly on your LCD. Obviously, there will be applications where you don't have a face defined, and that's why we have this undefined app focus dropdown here. So if there's any application that's detected that isn't paired with a particular face, here is what you can set the default face as a backup. And then, of course, we have the ability to reset this panel if you want to clear up all your app focus settings. Don't worry, we're not going to allow you to misclick on this. We make you double click to make sure all your hard work doesn't automatically get erased on an accidental click. So let's double click, turn that off. And finally, we have the settings panel here. And this will then take you back into the original firmware and hardware settings we talked about earlier. So there we have it, folks. We've gone through the cooling, the firmware and hardware settings, as well as the LCD customization for your THICC Q80 Trio. Finally, we have the lighting widget to control the 42 ARGB LEDs behind the 5-inch ultra slim HD display. So let's click into the lighting widget, and the first time you click in, Nexus will then initialize an animation and start running it across all connected components and detected OpenRGB compatible devices inside of your system. The THICC Q80 should now automatically be syncing all the RGB behind the LCD to these animations. And here we have a few options to select from. Under the Animate tab, you'll find a bunch of preset effects with customizable colors, along with preset palettes that you can add to sift through and customize to your heart's content. We also have advanced settings, which allow you to offset the hue, adjust the saturation, improve or slow down the speed, as well as create turbulence, which changes up the effects of the RGB a little. Go ahead and play around with it, figure out what you like here. With the power of Nexus, we also have the ability to do screen mirroring. Here, you can select from multiple monitors and apply a preset of effects that will then sample your screen and then match those colors playing back on the LCD. We also have audio visualization. This will plug into any music that's being played back on your systems, along with a few preset effects and color sources. So let's say you have the media face up on your Q80 LCD, you're running the audio visualization, you could set an effect and match it to your album art. So you'll have the Spotify canvas playing back on your screen, along with the same colors playing back behind the LCD. A very deep, connected, and digital experience powered by Nexus. You also have the ability to upload your own media files. Again, GIFs, images, videos, and we will color match those directly as best we can. You also have playback speed control all the way from 0% to 200%, and you can add a looping or bounce mode to go through the different media files you have uploaded. Of course, we also have the tried and true static color picker. And so here you have the full range of adjustment of RGB. And then as you go through and pick different colors, your history will populate on the right side. So if you accidentally change from the perfect color you had spent so much time selecting, you could always go back to it in one click. Finally, we have a few extra controls for brightness, along with speed for those playback effects that do support it. And last but not least, we have an RGB tester. This will cycle all the LEDs behind the Q80 LCD through the full range of RGBW and black. That way you can check for any missing LEDs or malfunctioning LEDs and make sure everything's working correctly. Again, in here for troubleshooting purposes, but also there for your convenience. And that's all, folks. We have now gone through initial installation of HYTE Nexus, setup for the THICC Q80 Trio, and full customization across the cooling, the faces, and the lighting for a comprehensive look at how to set up and get the most out of your brand new THICC Q80 Trio powered by HYTE Nexus.